Well, hello there, it's Paul here looking at the skies in August, and now that the nights are getting a bit longer, we've got a chance of getting a proper dark sky. We don't get dark skies at all through sort of from the end of May to the beginning of August, but they're starting to get properly dark again, and we've got quite a good few things to see in the sky. So let's first of all start off with the customary look at the sun here. Now the sun for a while has been really quite boring to look at because there's been nothing on it for 72% of days so far this year. Now last year that was 77%, so things are starting to look up a little bit, and we do have two sunspots. This was actually updated on the 31st of July. Quite a spot there, 2767, nothing remarkable about it, but the fact that it's there. And we've got a developing spot here, and some obvious and active region associated with it, 2768. Now we are quite sure, but looking at the polarity of those sunspots, that they are of cycle 25. They are not remnant cycle 24 spots, they are new cycle 25 spots, and I think this has been dropping. The last time we looked at this, it was 77% of 2020 days had no spots, but now that's only 72. Things are definitely moving, and one of the things associated with this was there was a large flare on the sun, and we've got an animation of it here. This is from one of the satellite things. This is a 5-hour period on the 31st of July, and this massive flare here, look at that prominence, it sort of breaks away there, and I reckon you're looking at about sort of 10 Earths in that, which is quite remarkable. And actually one of our members, our friend Pete Williamson from Shropshire in England, Pete got this absolutely magnificent photo of it from the ground in Shropshire, and you can see the structure of the sun and the chromosphere and this amazing flare, and you look at the detail that Pete's caught in that. It's absolutely fantastic photograph. And I will just give a little plug to Pete, actually, because he does a lot for us. He's been over to Ireland a few times to Solarfest and the Skelligs party, and he's been to Cosmos as well. And Pete does this sort of online radio station, astroradio.earth. That's the URL there, and he's on in the evenings, and he's always got an interview with someone, and it's always really interesting to listen to, and a great choice of music as well. I was on it myself back in April, and Pete and I had a great chat about what it is we do over here in Ireland and so on, so that's always worth tuning into as well. Great guy, Pete. Now then, you've probably been aware, and unless you've been hiding away in a cave somewhere, that we have had a very significant comet has been in the sky. Comet C2020 F3 Neowise. Neowise, of course, is near Earth, something or other object search, and it's one of the robotic things. So this wasn't discovered, unfortunately, by a person. It was discovered by a machine, but that's good because it turned out to be a great comet. Now, it is fading away at the moment. It has been up to about magnitude 2. It's passed its way sort of across the northern sky, all the way from Capella to below the plough, and that's where it is at the minute. If you sort of look up, here's the handle of the plough and the bucket of the Big Dipper, and it's in this area, just sort of to the west of Arcturus, or up and above left of Leo, in Coma Berenices, and that's where it is now, but it's faded down to about magnitude 5, 5.5, something like that, and it is moving away from the Earth very much now. So if you've missed it, don't worry, because in 6,800 years it'll be back. That's it. These are a couple of pictures I got myself from here in Larne, and that one, there's a bit of light pollution here, but it's good dust tail with some structure in it there, and I got the separate ion tail there as well. And this was a closer up one. This is through a 400mm f5 telescope, where and this was later on in the process actually, where the green of the cyanogen glow of the false nucleus looks really great, and you can see some detail in the dust tail as well. So that was Comet 2020 F3 Neowise. It was great. We're hoping for more. There are, if we just look here at the chart, there are other comets around. Neowise is still the brightest one. They're quoting 5.1 there. Then there are various other comets around in the sky from sort of 9th magnitude down to 15th, and so, well, you know, any one of those could flare up. You never quite know with comets. You know what they say about comets. They're like cats. They have tails and they do what they like. And you see comets coming in. We've had about 3 this year that were looking reasonably good, and then what happens quite often is that as they get closer to the sun, the thermal the thermal pressures inside them causes them to break up, and that tends to be the end of that pretty much. Then sometimes the pieces still coalesce a little bit, and you get a little bit of activity from them. That happened with one of the Atlas comets earlier this year, but you take pot luck with comets. Now then, starting our look at the sky, looking south on the 1st of August, 23:30. It's good and dark by that time, so you can see plenty there. And the first thing we'll see is an almost full moon, right adjacent to planets Jupiter and Saturn. And we're going to explore the planets a little bit more, because there is an opportunity in the early part of the month to actually see all the planets in one night. So if you fancy a late night starting about 11, finishing about 4 in the morning or thereafter, you can actually see all of the planets, and indeed a bonus, you can see dwarf planet series as well. So that is a treat worth looking forward to. Let's just have a look at that moon. We'll zoom in there, and we'll see the almost full moon. Now that's there, that's not quite full. You see there's just a little bit of softness at the edge there. Mare Crisium, very visible. Sea of Tranquility. Sinus Odium there, looking very good. And that's impressive. We'll zoom out again, just have a little look at the planets. Now then, just a short way, let's have a measure of this. Just a short way between there, just under 3 degrees from Jupiter to the moon at 23:30 on the 1st of August. So let's just get rid of that, and then we'll have a look at Jupiter. Here we go, and there's Jupiter, and we've got 3 moons visible: Europa, Ganymede, Callisto, and a gorgeous display of the great red spot right on the face of Jupiter there, and of course the weather systems of Jupiter, which you can watch over a period of time. We can animate this so that it runs forwards. Let's have a look. An hour later, there, that's an hour later, Jupiter will see the great red spot would have moved quite a bit, and another hour there. That's that. So that's Jupiter. The other thing you can do with Jupiter as well, looking at those 4 Galilean moons, if we advance this a day at a time, then you'll see that they move around the planet, each in its own orbit. And of course, when Galileo first saw that in 1609, he correctly ascertained that these bodies were moving around Jupiter, and got himself into trouble, because that wasn't the conventional thinking at the time. Okay, so there's Jupiter. We'll zoom out from Jupiter a bit, and we'll go and find Saturn, which is now Saturn is a little bit over to the east of Jupiter here. Let's just measure how far that is. That is from Jupiter to Saturn there. That's about 7.5, nearly 8 degrees, just to the east. So same binocular field of view, just about. And we'll zoom in on Saturn. Here we go. Right then. There's Saturn. Good rings on display for a couple more years yet. They'll flatten towards 2025. And of course, loads and loads of moons. Titan is the easy one to see in binoculars. Really, all the rest here, you kind of need to. You get 5 or 6 of them, Dione, Enceladus, Tethys, perhaps, on a camera picture or sort of an overexposed webcam through a telescope there. But through your binoculars, you'll see Saturn and you'll see Titan, and pictures show Titan quite nicely as well. And we're a little bit past opposition, just a little bit, so we can see that the shadow of Saturn on its rings is slightly asymmetrical, but we are only just 10 days or so past opposition, so we're looking at that reasonably straight on still. So that is Saturn. Okay, now moving on, we're now looking sort of slightly southeast, and we've moved the time forward a couple of hours as well, so 1:30 in the morning on the morning of the 2nd of August, and we're looking southeast and quite high up in the sky. We can start with the Great Square of Pegasus. That's often a good place to start when we're looking for Neptune, and we'll move down a bit, and then we'll find Pisces, and we come to the head of the fish, this little. That's quite a distinctive little asterism, the head of the fish there. Oops, there we go. And you'll find that, and then just down and to the right a little bit here. Let me just put that in the middle, and we'll go and find Neptune. There is. Oops, that's not Neptune. Here is Neptune. Now, Neptune, you've got to bear in mind, is magnitude 7.9 or so. And it's you can find it in binoculars or a telescope. You cannot see it naked eye. It is not visible naked eye, even to those with very keen eyesight, I have to say. Magnitude 8 just doesn't work like that. But let's zoom in and have a look at Neptune. Now, you only will ever in a telescope of amateur variety see this as a blue dot, and that's all I've ever seen it as. But if you go closer, you can see Neptune and its largest moon, Triton. Some of the other moons, you might get Triton. The others are very difficult to photograph and see, but Triton is quite bright. You can even see on the stellarium here that Neptune does have a very thin ring system and a beautiful blue disk. It has the fastest winds of the solar system, apart from the solar wind, of course. But in terms of planetary weather, Neptune has extreme weather way beyond anything we get here on Earth. So that's well worth looking at. So you can see that and tick that one off. So that's Neptune. Okay, now zooming back out again, we're at the head of the fish here in the Great Square of Pegasus at the top, and here's Neptune we were looking at. If you're really lucky, if you've got a good south horizon, you look right down, you might just be able to pick up the bright star Fomalhaut on the horizon. It does rise a little higher later than that, but that's really quite difficult to see. You need a perfectly good south horizon for that. It looks quite good from Mediterranean latitudes. I've seen it from sort of Spain and Portugal before, looking quite good, but it's much lower in the sky here. However, if you have got a decent enough horizon, go sort of somewhere between Neptune and Fomalhaut, about 70% of the way from Neptune down to Fomalhaut. You find that there's just the constellation Aquarius just here, and right at the bottom there is this. That's there we are. Dwarf planet Ceres, asteroid number 1. Let's have a look at that, and I don't suppose we'll get any great detail on this, but it is of magnitude 8 or thereabouts. So similar to Neptune actually, because though it's tiny, it's much nearer and nearer to the Sun, of course, so it's collecting more light. But that's a good one to tick off. Dwarf Planet 1 Ceres. There we go. So that's Ceres. Now moving the clock forward another 2 hours to 3:30 a.m. and looking towards the southeast, quite high up actually. Let me just get a measurement on that. But fairly high up. Mars is now very prominent in the southeastern sky. At that time, 30 degrees above the horizon, so well up. You'll have no trouble finding that at all, because Mars is also pretty bright. heading towards its brightest opposition in October, but still pretty good in August. Not, fun enough, as bright as the full moon. You will probably in certain disreputable newspapers see Mars to be as bright as the full moon come October. It's nothing like as bright as the full moon. It's about 12 or 13 magnitudes less bright than the full moon, but hey, never let the facts get in the way of a good story. But now we'll find Mars very easily. It's actually, we found the head of the fish before, and it's further along Pisces from there, and you'll see the two bright stars of Aries, Hamal and Sharatan, and Mars is very, very obvious and prominent, not least by its red colour. But let's go and have a zoom in on that. Mars is always a bit disappointing in a telescope because although it's near, and it's pretty near at the minute, and getting nearer, it is actually quite small. It's about half the diameter of the Earth, and it's populated, of course, at the moment entirely by robots, as far as we know. Mars, there you can see various features on the surface. It's got a very distinct phase on it at the moment. And the two moons, I haven't seen the two moons myself, Deimos and Phobos. They're very difficult to see, but I have seen people with sort of 14-inch telescopes and so on get photographs in which they're visible. So that's Mars and its moons. Mars very prominent in the early morning sky, 3:30. It looks quite fantastic. So there's Mars. So we'll move along from there. Okay, so moving along from Mars towards the east again. I've left the time 3:30 because that still works. Just let's get a measurement on this from Mars there. 20 more degrees to the east from Mars, and also if we find the two bright stars of Aries, Hamal and Sharatan, and look downwards halfway towards the horizon, you'll find the head of the whale, which is quite a distinctive asterism there, and in between Aries and the head of the whale, just in here, is Uranus, magnitude 5.8. So some people can actually see Uranus naked eye. I've never have myself, but in a really, really good sky, you ought to be able to see Uranus at 5.8 if you've got particularly good eyesight, because it is just about on the edge of naked eye visibility. I have only ever seen it in binoculars and small telescopes as a green blob, and that's about as much as you will get. I don't think you'll get any detail. We go into it though. I have seen photographs of the 5 moons, the 5 main moons of Uranus, that amateurs have taken through fairly large telescopes, Celestron SCTs and that sort of thing. But that's Uranus, so distinctive green blob and good to see. Okay, now looking towards the east, where the dawn will be oncoming quite shortly. I've moved the clock forward to 4 o'clock because that's when it all starts to happen here. Now we've got, before we go on to Venus, we have got the Seven Sisters and Aldebaran and the Hyades have now risen at this point, and we're beginning to see, because this is August, we're just beginning to see the very beginnings of Orion rising in the east first thing in the morning. That's the first sight you get of Orion, and it's always worth having a look at when we get the chance to see Betelgeuse, to see if anything has changed since we last saw Betelgeuse around about April-May time. Because it has been going through some fluctuations, so it'd be good to see how it looks having come out the other side of the sun. And so we're looking at that. But the thing here is Venus, planet Venus, and let's have a closer look at Venus, because Venus has got a nice phase on it at the minute. It's actually gone past the point of its highest brightness, which is actually when the phase is about 25%. Because it gets visibly smaller as it gets further away from us. It's around about a half phase there now. That would look quite nice in binoculars, even better in a small telescope, and that's -4 magnitude or so. So Venus is very, very bright in the morning there. So that is Venus. Let's just zoom out from there. That's very, very bright and prominent. I've seen it a couple mornings when I've been up. Now then, I'm going to move the clock forward a bit further because this is just about possible. If we go forward here half an hour, just, and really the light of the oncoming dawn is now drowning most things out, but we may, looking just almost northeast there, we may just get a look at Mercury just above the horizon. Also asteroid 4 Vesta is not far from Mercury. I don't think you'd see Vesta in that background light, but you will see Mercury if you've got a good northeastern horizon. We'll move closer into that. Again, Mercury's got a bit of a phase on it as well. Very, very much sort of gibbous though. So that's Mercury just a few degrees above the horizon. In fact, let's take a measurement on that just to know what we're looking at. That's Mercury, and we are looking at this, and it is sort of there. It's only actually about 3 degrees above the horizon at that point. Now it gets higher later. If you extend that, it gets higher still. So 10 minutes later, and it's actually nearly 4 degrees above the horizon. But all the time that background sky is getting brighter, so it's harder and harder to see, even though it's above the horizon. But keep looking for a bit, because the sunrise isn't actually for a little while after that. We can perhaps push that out a bit to 5 o'clock. You might still be able to see Mercury at 5 o'clock, 5 past 5. There you go. So that's the tour of the planets. Now then, let's go back and have a look at the moon. Now it's almost full. This is midnight, actual midnight. This is Sunday the 2nd. So this is a Saturday night, the 1st of August. We're just into the first second, not even the first second of the Sunday. It's the 2nd, and it's almost full. But let's just see how that progresses. Now we go to the 3rd. It's actually full on the 3rd. That's slightly full, going a little bit soft on this side, but as full as that side. And we follow this through for a few more days, and we find that it's a waning gibbous, and then it's down to about half on the 11th. And then it starts, it's not, we go to the 13th, it's not risen by midnight. And this is really useful because this is when the peak of the Perseid meteor shower occurs. So we will have not too much interference from the moon. It will appear later, but then see that's rising at 1, 2. So we'll get a bit of moon disturbance, but not a lot. It'll be a less than third quarter moon, and not rising until about 1 o'clock or so. So we will have a reasonably good crack this year at the Perseids, weather permitting, of course. So now to look for the Perseid meteor shower. We need to be looking northeast, sort of really as soon as the sun goes down you can start looking. I certainly have seen Perseid meteors as early as 22:30 in a slightly light sky even. I did catch a fireball on film like that some years ago. But starting at about 11, we're looking to the northeast, and the actual radiant, which is not where you want to be looking, is actually just at the top of Perseus there, or just below Cassiopeia. That's the radiant there. Not far from the double cluster in Perseus, just there. But really where you want to be looking, you want to, first of all, if you want to observe, just lie down on a sunbed or something with a view somewhere to the northeast, and you're looking sort of 30 or 40 degrees around that radiant. So anywhere, Cepheus, Andromeda, Great Square of Pegasus sort of directions. I've caught a lot of good Perseids photographically up in Cygnus, which is quite some way away. I did get one close in at Cassiopeia, so in that huge area there. And if you're setting up a camera, run it continuously on sort of 10 or 20 second exposure, something in that sort of range, and perhaps the ISO set to 800 or so. It's a bit of a balance to be struck. If you want to get the meteors as bright as possible, you actually use shorter exposures. But the trouble with that is that you don't then get much else by way of background stars and so on. So it's a bit of a mishmash. But I find 10 to 20 seconds, 15 seconds is a good compromise. Just keep the camera continuously firing at 15-second intervals, and with a wide-angle-ish lens on, sort of something like in the old 35mm money, a 24 or 28 or 35. That sort of thing gives you a good wide spread. And you can just capture. I've been known to take 1,000 pictures on the Perseid nights, and sometimes 2 or 3 of them will have a meteor in. The odds aren't great, but Perseid meteor shower looking good this year, and it is a great spectacle, very enjoyable to watch, and great to try and get some photos of it. So good luck with that. Now here we are, now that we've advanced the date up to the 12th of August, this is set for 2300, and the thing about that is that the moon is now well out of the way. It won't be rising for another couple of hours, and it will give us a chance to look south at the Milky Way. Now of course we in the Northern Hemisphere aren't ideally positioned for looking into the centre of the galaxy, because the people in the Southern Hemisphere get a much better view of that, but at this time of year we can start to see fairly well south. There's a few things worth looking at. We'll start off high up here. We have the summer triangle becoming very apparent. Summer triangle as christened of course by the late Sir Patrick Moore, with 3 stars Deneb, Vega and Altair forming the 3 corners of the triangle, and that's a rich part of the Milky Way. The Cygnus rift through there is great, but as you go further south it gets better still into the clouds of Scutum here, and then there's a whole bunch of Messier objects that are well worth seeing at that point. Now we've got a few here. Let's have a look at a couple. The first one here now we've got, that's not Ekran 5, whatever that is. There we go. The Eagle Nebula, Messier 16. We can center up on that and zoom into it. There's the Eagle. That looks very, very impressive. You can see that quite easy. That's one of the higher up objects. We're getting closer to the horizon, the southern horizon here, but that's M16 the Eagle, and not very far away from that I think that's M17 the Omega Nebula, there, or the Swan as some call it. Let's have a look in there and we can see that again. That's hydrogen alpha star forming regions, plenty of HA there. If you've got a camera that's sensitive to that, it'll show it up quite nicely. Then we have others here. The Black Swan is Messier 18 there. Let's have a zoom in on that one. There we are. There's Messier 18. That's an open cluster. Okay, and of all of these, I really do think the jewel in the crown is a bit further down. We'll go down and find it. Here we go. The Great Sagittarius Cluster, Messier 22. Messier 22, although it's kind of harder to find because of its proximity to the horizon, and you do need a good sky to see it. I've only ever seen it once, but I really do think it is at least as good as Messier 13. People talk about Messier 13 because it's easy to see. It's up in Hercules. It's often quite high up. This one, Messier 22, is probably one of the 2 best Northern Hemisphere globular clusters. I'm afraid, again, the guys in the Southern Hemisphere, they have it better. I was very privileged once to see 47 Tucane, which is close to the Small Magellanic Cloud, through a 15-inch Dobsonian telescope, and that was an absolutely fantastic sight. And all I could say was, it's full of stars. Corny, I know, but that's what it looked like. So there's a few of those objects in the Milky Way there. There's others around, and we'll perhaps look a bit more at those in September. But that, for now, is the sky. And just one other thing I'm going to mention briefly, the International Space Station. Just one other thing now, there are no visible passes of the International Space Station in August. It's just one of the off seasons. However, What you can do is you can see if you've got a suitable. I do say this all the time, that don't do anything to do with the sun unless you know exactly what you're doing, and it's best if you do it your first time with someone who's done it before, just to keep it all safe. But the International Space Station is doing a number of passes of the sun and a few of the moon as well, mostly the sun at the moment. And this is all from my location in the north here in County Antrim. But starting on the 9th of August, there's a whole sequence of them. The 4-star ones are rated better. This website is brilliant. transit-finder.com. Go there and you can actually put your location in, and it'll just tell you when it happens to you. If you don't have to go anywhere, it shows up in red like this. If it goes nearby, you can look on a map. The maps don't quite work properly at the moment, but they're good enough to work out where you need to be to actually see the space station go in front of the sun. Now it takes about a second sometimes, or sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less, to cross the sun. So you really need to be filming video. But what I do is I have a little 4K camera that goes on the back of a small telescope, which has a solar filter, Barda filter on the front, and I get some quite short exposures to keep the space station sharp, and then I disassemble the video into separate frames and then overlay them all so you can see the ISS go in front of the sun, or indeed the moon. The moon equally, and there are two sorts of moon pass. Only one sort of sun pass, which is a silhouette, but the moon, the ISS can pass the moon either as a silhouette if it's not lit, or as a dot brighter than the moon if the ISS is lit. So that's that. Right, so thanks for watching, and keep safe, keep looking up.